so many times teachers, parents, therapists, they try to teach all children the same way. And then if they don't thrive, we blame them instead of looking at what we might be able to do better to help them. And coaching doesn't look at the child as the problem. It acknowledges that children learn differently, and we can look at all facets of them, figure out how they learn best, and then use what we learned to help them thrive.
Welcome to the Health Coach OT. I'm Dr. Jaclyn Schwartz, occupational therapist, scientist, and board certified health coach. If you're a therapist ready to expand your practice and transform client outcomes, you've found your home. Here, we explore the evidence-based coaching approaches that help clients make sustainable shifts in nutrition, movement, stress, and the daily habits that create real, lasting wellness. Today, we're diving deep into ADHD coaching with Julia Welter, an OT who made the bold transition from traditional pediatric practice to family-centered ADHD coaching. Julia is going to share why she believes the 1-hour weekly model has significant limitations, how she's empowering patients to become therapeutic partners, and practical strategies you could start implementing today. Let's get started. Hi, Julia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit more about you. I'm really interested in hearing more about your journey from occupational therapy to ADHD coaching.
Sure. So I have an undergrad degree in archaeology, and that is because I did not know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I just had the hardest time in school figuring that out. And so I literally took 2 classes that I was interested in. It was speech and language pathology, and it was archaeology. And then I landed on archaeology. I loved it and it was awesome. But when I realized that most people work in museums, and that just wasn't really aligned with what I wanted to do, I started searching for other things. And so both my mom and my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, they both recommended OT. They were both like, "Oh, we've been hearing about this field that we think you'd just be awesome for. You love working with kids. You love helping people. This would just be perfect." So, of course, having ADHD, I was really excited about the idea. And then it went out of my brain and years went by. And I was working in home support and in a preschool with children with autism, ODD, ADHD, of all sorts of diagnoses. And in doing that, I was working alongside OTs all the time. So I really started learning kind of what it was like to be a pediatric OT, and I just loved it. So then that really got me going, and I applied to one school, which looking back, I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm just I was very focused on UNE, which is where I went, and I wanted to go there, and that was it. So I just put my eggs all in one basket, and I got in, luckily. And so I loved school. I always have loved school. It's a very like A plus B equals C type of thing. And I think I just really thrived in that setting. And so after graduating, I've worked in outpatient pediatric clinics for about 7 years. And I really started finding that I was connecting most with those angsty, broody, pre-teenagers who just felt misunderstood and who were underperforming in most areas of their lives. I just saw such potential in them. Um, and then those kids almost always had ADHD. So I realized that while I love working with really all children, my passion was working with families challenging with ADHD. And I just realized how much parents were struggling in helping their children at home and in school. And so that's kind of what started me leading into the business of coaching parents.
And what made you pivot from like a traditional occupational therapy approach to more of a coaching approach?
Sure. So I think I could best answer that by maybe explaining what I was doing in the one-to-one treatment setting versus kind of what I'm doing with coaching, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sounds
Um,
great.
so typically I work with the child an hour a week, and usually this starts with some type of movement activity to get them ready for the tasks that they may need more attention for. So this might be something like an obstacle course, like a swinging activity or yoga. And then we might play a game that works on an area of difficulty. So for the kiddos with ADHD, they might have trouble with working memory. So I have a groceries game where I place various toy food all around the room. And then I'll say, first get me an apple, then a potato, then a box of cereal. And they have to use that working memory to hold all that information in their brain. And go and get all three foods in that specific order. And so to make it extra fun, I might put a basket on a scooter board and have them push it around while collecting the foods. And then we might end with like a sensory or calming activity, like playing with putty. And I might engage them in talking about their week. So tying in some emotional regulation by asking them about something that was hard, how they handled it, and if they felt they could have handled it better, what they could do next time. So that's what like a typical OT session would look like with a child with ADHD. And it's great. And we have fun and the child's engaged, but it's one time a week for 60 minutes. And once they leave, they forget all about it because they've got a busy life. And so it has limitations with only having that 1 hour a week with a child. The parent has so much more time with the child, right? So I only get a few minutes at the end of the session to explain to the parent what we worked on and give them ideas for home. And parents, as we know, are not only busy, but these parents might also have ADHD themselves. So I totally understand that the chances that they will be able to work on these skills other times during the week are probably pretty slim, either because they may have gotten what I've said or they don't have time. And so that's one of the main reasons why I've wanted to do parent coaching. And so with parent coaching, it allows me to teach those methods that I will typically use in sessions to the parents directly. And that way they can engage their child in those activities that I only get to do one time a week, many times throughout the week. The parents can do it. It also takes into account the entire family and not just the child. So it allows me time to explain to the family about the unique ADHD brain, how it works, how they can tailor their parenting to best support their child. And I try to explain this to people by using an analogy like about plants. So I really love plants. I have like 60 of them in our small house. But so I will say, like, say you buy a plant and you're really excited about it. You give it the same amount of light, same amount of water that you give all your other thriving plants. And then it starts to wilt and turn brown. And most of us, I certainly do, will blame ourselves. Like, what did I do wrong? I gave it the same amount of light and water as I gave all my other plants. They're doing so well. So we never blame the plant. We'll blame ourselves because all plants are different and need so many different things to grow. But then if we think of children, so many times teachers, parents, therapists, they try to teach all children the same way. And then if they don't thrive, we blame them and then try to fix them. We send them to therapy, tutors, etc., instead of looking at what we might be able to do better to help them. And coaching doesn't look at the child as the problem. It acknowledges that children learn differently and we can look at all facets of them, figure out how they learn best, and then use what we learned to help them thrive.
Yeah, so it seems like it just gives you a little bit more flexibility to support the parent and engaging more throughout the week, as opposed to like the one OT session.
Exactly. Yeah.
For people who maybe haven't thought about ADHD in a while or haven't, had a lecture since OT school, or students, can you tell us a little bit more about ADHD and what type of performance deficits might bring them to OT or to coaching?
Sure. And so I'll just give a very, very basic breakdown of ADHD. So most of us know like the hyperactive part of ADHD and that impulsive part. So the excessive movement, the restlessness, impulsivity, those kids that will blurt things out in class. So that's one type of ADHD, the hyperactive and impulsive piece. And then there's also the inattentive piece, which I feel like are the kids that tend to fall under the radar pretty often. So those are the kiddos that are a little more quiet. They might be the daydreamers. They might have difficulty focusing. They will also most likely have challenges with motivation and organization. So these children aren't as obvious, I feel like, to teachers because they're not the ones typically getting in trouble. They definitely still have challenges like the other group. And then there's the combined type, which is both. So, but many people have said to me like, "Oh, well, we're all a little ADHD, right? We all have those things." And it's just not true. Those of us with ADHD experience these symptoms in a way that impacts our day-to-day lives significantly. So it's not just this momentary forgetfulness or inattention. I've heard it described like for example, depression. Everyone's been sad at one point, but not everyone's been depressed. So it's like that. So what's different is the intensity and the duration of these symptoms. And then the performance deficits that I see for children that come to me with ADHD are typically difficulties in executive functioning. So those are things like starting tasks, organizing, time management, attention, controlling their impulses, sequencing those multi-step tasks like the one I mentioned in that grocery game, and then also emotional control. And so that's one area that I feel like isn't talked about as much. I was actually diagnosed with depression as well when I was a little bit older than my diagnosis of AD. And now looking back, I'm wondering if I really just was struggling with the emotional control aspect of ADHD. And because I don't really feel like I have depression. So it's people don't really know that part as much. So a lot of kids can have difficulty controlling their anger, a lot of low self-esteem and confidence because, those of us with ADHD have been given many negative messages throughout their lives. So when we're little, we're called naughty or troublemakers. We'll get in trouble for not talking it in our turn or blurting things out in class. And then as we get older and into adulthood, we might be labeled as lazy or unmotivated because we're struggling with executive functioning and managing our tasks. But while we're all different, people with ADHD also have a lot of awesome strengths that just really don't get talked about. Find that, this is general sense, but mostly a lot of us are really passionate. So when we find something we love, we really go all in, fiercely loyal to our friends and our family, incredibly creative, out of the box thinkers. So my job is to learn about the client's strengths and use those to overcome the areas of difficulty, which just aligns so beautifully with my background as an OT, as I'm already using clients' interests and meaningful activities to build on their skills.
Yeah. And so it sounds like there's a lot of things you're looking for. Do you have like a formal evaluation or strategies that help you, see how your sessions are doing or plan your treatment?
Yes. So it'll start with family and client and teacher interviews. So I'll learn about how the challenges are affecting all areas of the client's life as well as their family's life. And I'll use various assessments. So I won't worry you with like the long list, but I'll give one example. But there's the Barkley Deficits in Executive Functioning Scale. And that provides insight regarding challenges and strengths in executive functioning, time management, organization, self restraint, and emotional regulation. And so that will start providing my goal areas. So also, if the family is local or if it's feasible for me to do so by video, I will observe the child in a situation that's typically challenging for them, like completing their homework or completing tasks at school. And then once we're really clear on those specific areas of difficulty, as well as the areas that they're really strong in, we'll create goals to work towards them as a team.
I really liked when you talked about what an OT session looks like and what a coaching session looks like focused on ADHD. Are there any other interventions that you would want to talk about or share?
It's tricky to talk about one in particular because it really depends on the areas of difficulty. But like, let's say the child has difficulty with planning and organizing, right? So say they have a book report due in 2 months. So I might talk to the parent and or the child about, okay, so you have this book report due in 2 months and we'll work backwards from there. So it's due on, like September 1st. So 2 weeks before that, we're going to want to make sure that you have like a rough draft. And then, 2 weeks before that. So kind of plan it out with them and teach them how then they themselves can start using those strategies to work on further tasks that they might be assigned.
So it sounds like it's very tailored to like client and which aspects of ADHD are causing them the most trouble in their day-to-day life, and as well as what they need and want to do in terms of the parent and the kid.
Exactly. Exactly. And it just allows for a lot more time for the parent to work on those things throughout the week.
What advice would you give to other OTs who are interested in working more with kids with ADHD or using some of the coaching approaches that you seem to have added to your OT toolbox?
I think just educating yourself more on ADHD. There's so many awesome resources out there. Even like for me, I really didn't know a lot about ADHD until I started working with kids with ADHD because I just, I don't know. There was always something more interesting to do than to learn about my ADHD. However, once I started working with these kids and realizing like, wow, like they really are struggling with this, like that is an ADHD trait. And then seeing things in myself that that started to pique my interest about it. And now I love learning about it. It's fascinating to me about how little things can be tweaked for kids and adults and make like really big changes for them. It's kind of like the plant analogy, just a little bit of different amount of water or sunlight can just make such a big difference. So I would just recommend learning more about ADHD. I also recommend maybe like finding some type of like coaching. I took a course on coaching parents and how parents best learn. So that also I think would be really helpful. And then just kind of practicing those skills at the end of sessions. So leaving enough time to be able to say like, okay, so you can totally do these things at home. And maybe even providing them with something like on a handout or something written down or a short email, because those of us with ADHD and just people in general, we tend to forget things. Like if we tend to be really excited about something in the moment and then life happens and we forget about it once we leave. So give them tangible to take with them.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times there's pressure from either the parents or billing or something that OT should look like the therapist and the kid on the mat doing something like a fight motor activity or something. But even there are a lot of conversations with parents that can just be so powerful.
I agree. Or even just like, we don't have a lot of time at the end of the sessions. Like you said, billing wise, we can't spend an entire session talking to a parent, which I wish sometimes we could. But just quick little things that you can give them at the end of a session just can be so helpful for them.
And so, where can people learn more about you?
I am on Instagram. The business is Wildly Brilliant Brains. It's a little bit of a long phrase, but I just couldn't get rid of any one of the words. I just think it really perfectly captures ADHD. So on Instagram, it's at Wildly Brilliant Brains, and Facebook is the same name.
Sounds great. And I'll be sure to put those in the show notes. But Julia, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us more about ADHD. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Julia Welter sharing her incredible journey from traditional OT to ADHD coaching. I hope her plant analogy resonated with you as much as it did with me. The idea that instead of trying to fix kids who aren't thriving, we need to understand how their unique brains work and tailor our approaches accordingly. And here's the big mindset shift. Instead of seeing that limited session time as a constraint, consider how you can empower parents to become your therapeutic partners throughout the week. Even small changes to how you wrap up a session, like providing a written takeaway or spending those extra few minutes coaching parents, can multiply your impact exponentially. You could find Julia on Instagram and Facebook at Wildly Brilliant Brains, so definitely follow her for updates. If today's episode sparked something for you, I'd love to hear about it. Share your biggest takeaway on social media and tag both Julia and me. And if you know an OT who's been curious about ADHD coaching or working more effectively with neurodivergent families, please share this episode with them. This has been the Health Coach OT. I'm Dr. Jaclyn Schwartz, and I'll see you next time.